We are making our way on episode 6 of the Sweet Spot Pod. I'm JT Hayes, Run Pure Sports. And this week, something special. One of the co-founders at Run Pure Sports, I remember when you were doing your daily playbook, and I started to see it on Twitter and got a little bit interested in what you were doing. And we interacted, and then I became a member there. And then during COVID, this idea that you had clearly for a long time had been building, planning, making the roadmap for it took off, and that all came together. And now it's been about 2 years, a little bit more than 2 years. Run Pure Sports, Andrew Peterson, A Peterson 1999 on DraftKings, AP Run Pure, I think on Twitter. How are you doing today?
Yeah, doing great. We've kind of known each other or talked to each other for quite some time now, it seems like. So it was your DFS playbook, and started out kind of as like a little side thing, hobby, and turned it into a lot more. And I'd been talking with BigT for quite some time. And I forget one of the other sites that launched at the time when I launched your DFS playbook. I think it was Numberball, actually, which I think doesn't exist anymore, which is kind of crazy. Just with the success that the founder had in DFS. I think he went into NFTs and everything. Who knows? He's coming back with what's going on in that world. But yeah, I mean, I remember talking with Tony a lot, like often about this, and it took COVID. It took that whole environment to make it happen. We started playing in the CPC poker club. So we were like talking on a nightly basis, playing cards, and one thing led to another. And we started Run Pure Sports with Hoop, and then, brought on JSU, Mangone, everyone else. And, here we are today. So we're just trying to continue to grow this thing. And the good thing about the people that we have, and this goes to everyone, like no one's greedy. No one is like, everyone's really easy to work with. And that's what you need if you want to build up a company the right way. We're not doing everything perfect. I'll be the first to admit that, but we're trying to get better each and every step along the way. So it's been a fun journey so far. I don't know how far you want me to go in my background and kind of the transition that happened for me, but I'm happy to go into it if you want.
Well, I think it's something, because there's a lot of people, I think, that are members of ours that maybe started this. I know I started this as a hobby when I retired from government a little bit early, and I went into the private sector, and I'd always loved sports, and I found this thing, and I'm like, this is kind of crazy. Do people really make money at this? And then seeing the prize pools and learning the theory of it. And there's a lot of people, I think, that have that desire, that say, I love sports. I maybe some of them like math, maybe they're just like puzzles, whatever it is. And then maybe I can make a living that revolves around DFS or involves DFS that kind of gives me a little bit more freedom. And so what you've done in going from, a 9 to 5, a grind, travel, a lot of stress, not that there's no stress involved. There's a lot of stress involved in running a business, particularly one where you have a lot of very high demanding customers. But I think what you've done here is something that a lot of people would like to do, which is get away from that, going to an office, commuting every day, and making your life how you want it to be. And for you, that involved DFS. So what were you doing? I know your background's in finance, but how did you get started in DFS? What made you want to do that? And then have you always been drawn to sort of entrepreneurialism, or is this maybe the first company that you've run? How about those things?
Yeah. So my background, when I talk to people, my neighbor, whatever, finance, manage money and stuff. But my true background was in poker. So I started playing poker when I was, high school. And the crazy thing about those days, Ultimate Bet, I forget all the sites now, but I remember putting money on when I was like 16, 17. And it was funny. I took down like my first tournament for like $3,500 when I was like, I think 17 or something. And I had wire transfers from offshore, accounts,
Morocco.
hitting my bank account. And my parents like sat me down and they're like, they thought I was running like an online scam or something like that, because, they didn't really know that a ton about computers then and stuff. And no, it was just, it was funny. Like my account got flagged by the bank, and, not like a huge town that I'm from. And so it was just kind of funny. So I had to tell them about the success that I had. And it wasn't till I won. It was off of $20. I won the seat to the Poker Star, or no, it was the Ultimate Bet Caribbean Classic in Aruba. And they gave me like $3,000 of like travel money and all this stuff. And I'm like, you know what? Because my parents were always skeptical, especially my dad. He's a physician. He's very well educated. He's always had a very high importance in education and everything like that. So it's funny. So I decided, you know what? I'm going to take them on this trip with me, pay for everything. And I was in college at the time. And so I did that. And I ended up getting like 23rd or something, that tournament. Took home like 20K, being a 20-year-old kid. And that's when it kind of clicked for them. And I got, the approval or whatever for them. And they kind of embraced poker at that time. And anyone that is familiar with the poker world, I think it was like Black Monday or Friday, or everything got shut down. Money got left on sites. I mean, others got hurt a lot worse than I did. I didn't have a ton on at that time. I think I was running bad actually. So it was a good time for it to shut down, focus on school a little bit. But yeah, then I got into finance, managing money, which honestly, it's a grind too. It's a lot of jobs like that are going to be grind. So I'm very fortunate to get into doing this. I sold my practice, I spent 10, 12 years building up a practice, and I sold that to my former partner. Basically, he manages all those clients, and I still manage just 2 clients, 2 family accounts. And so all in on RPS right now. And I love it. I mean, there's ups and downs, but the upside here is massive. We have such a strong team with great people. So, really excited for the things to come, and it's going to be interesting for sure.
At 17, did you have to use were you going into your parents' room and taking your father's license to get listed on the site, or you were just able to sign up there, no problem?
Those were the Wild West days. You said your age and they took your money. They did not care. I mean, like now we know they're Ponzi. They're all Ponzi schemes. They took the money in, and then they wasn't like a bank. If you think of a bank, how it works, they have to have a certain amount of reserves, on hand. Like the day, like Full Tilt and all those sites got shut down, I think they had like 5% of the money on hand that they were actually holding in people's accounts. Yeah. So it's crazy how long that lasted, but yeah, they did not care about my age at that point in time.
A lot of money got seized, and yeah, as soon as you make a deposit there, that money's going through like 8 different countries on a little trip there, and it's certainly into someone's pocket. But now we're here 2 years into Run Pure Sports, and we started out a lot of free content. Almost all of the videos, the shows before the baseball slates, which was our probably coincided with the bubble for the NBA when we first started. A lot of that was free. A lot of the podcasts were free. And now there's still a ton of free content, but now we're having a lot more premium content because the membership base is so high. And I see it and hear it in the comments when I'm on the free show on Sunday morning and I talk about a contrarian pitcher or a stack. The members in there are like, hey, we can't be giving this to the world. We're paying for your services collectively right. For a reason. Is that kind of the thought process behind the premium, is to give our members a little bit more than maybe other sites, or more than that just is out there that anyone can find? I know there's some special things planned as well.
Yeah, really good question. I think, at the start of all of this, the goal is just to, build up a market and build up credibility. We've done that twice over. I mean, having guys like BigT, Hoop, guys that are just so well known out there in the industry makes that very easy. I think, just to be pretty transparent, like when you look at what our value proposition is to our customers and our members, I don't think it's like, I don't think our expertise is what some of these other sites are. I don't think, a site like Osimo. So very good at projections. They have good tools. A site like SaberSim, now a partner of ours. We looked into building our own optimizer, but we just felt that's not our expertise. Why waste time trying to build that when there's companies out there that do that, focus on it, and it's their expertise. So we partner with them, and we're building a great relationship for them. I think what we do the best, better than, and a lot of sites out there do things very, very well. What I think we do the best is the team that we have, our personalities. We're very transparent, we're very honest, and we do good quality shows, good quality video content. We make things very simple. And so my kind of position to, the other people that, all the others that help start this thing is, I think we need more premium only content. I think, and if you're someone out there and you watch all of our free shows, but you're not a member, I'm not trying to scare you, but I do see us pushing towards kind of closing things up a little bit. We're still going to be loud and out there and on YouTube. Like, those things aren't going away. But as far as like our picks, plays, takes, breakdowns and stuff, I see that transitioning towards being behind the paywall, because that is one of the biggest values that we bring to the community over here. And I think that would do a lot of people a good service if we did that.
Yeah, one of the things that all really well-run businesses, really successful businesses do is they focus on what their strongest skill sets are and not try to dabble into 20 different things. I think that's why the deal with Saber made so much sense, and the way you explained it is perfect. And if you're listening to this and you're not a member yet, and maybe you've seen some screenshots or seen some of those free shows, it's really funny now when the members are in there on the free shows, we haven't been getting to the high number of likes that we like to set. And I think it's personally because the members are like, I'm not giving out a like. I want those plays in Discord. I don't want those to be given out. So selfishly, I understand that. But if you're not, you should consider joining right now. Use code GETBETS, and the Run Pure Bet subscription will be included in your first month as well when you sign up for the DFS plan. Like and subscribe to the Run Pure Sports YouTube network if you're watching this on YouTube, which you may be. It's the big red button at the bottom there. So we know that Run Pure Sports is new. Hopefully, we're continuing to expand and going to be around and going to be a very interesting company to follow, is my prediction here for the next several years. But our core thing is talking about sports. So we're going to dive into some of the things that are going on this baseball season. Been an interesting season so far. Certainly, we always say that pitching is more consistent than hitting. Man, it has not felt that way for me this season. It's been almost a landmine every single night. The days when there would be a Scherzer or a DeGrom on the slate, you'd just be like, hey, I'm definitely playing this guy. Can't even do that with Garrett Cole this year. You've been able to do that for the most part with Shane McClanahan, up until recently with Nestor Cortez. But brings me to my first point. And some of these things, some of these teams, it just doesn't change. The Yankees, who going into the season, I thought they're an okay team, 12-game lead on everybody else in the American League East, a division that has kind of fallen backwards a little bit. And then the Houston Astros, who today are doing it once again, putting on an offensive performance at home, MVP candidate Yordan Alvarez, and that sign cheating scandal behind them a few years now. And they have a 10-game lead out west, looking like they might run away with it. Nothing seems to change. And again, even with the Astros, I said I was a little concerned about their pitching. Their bullpen's been outstanding. The Yankees bullpen has been tops in baseball. It's kind of amazing to me how they've been able to retool. What do you think about those teams? And do you see anyone in the American League East or the American League West challenging the Yankees or the Astros here the rest of the way? And have you been using them? I've been using them quite a bit because they're two of the best offenses in the game, and on any given slate, they can put up a bunch of runs. So what about that?
Yeah, great question. What's kind of funny for me is like, I don't like, I'm not like often taking that macro view of baseball when it comes to, because I'm so, with baseball, it's, I watch a ton of baseball, but it's always like in relation to like, I'm playing DFS. So it's like on a day-to-day basis instead of like a macro basis. But looking at it, so like you gave me this sheet ahead of time of what we're gonna, discuss today, which I love.
Which Holden hates, by the way. Holden was very disrespectful about it. He thought it was terrible, but everyone else has loved it.
I love a script to go off of. I mean, it just, it helps to stay focused, stay on point. But it was like I noticed it was the first time that I went to MLB.com and I just looked at the rankings, and I was surprised. I'm like, I'm like, the Yankees are 50-18, a 12-game lead over Toronto and Boston, and the I'm not surprised by the names, Yankees, Astros. The Mets, I think, is, there's a lot, it has to be a big Mets base of fans out there. I think they're having a really incredible season. I actually didn't know that they were 45-25. And so what's funny is like, I'll go like, got a bunch of, group of buddies and stuff. And, when we're out, with them all talking sports, whatever, it's funny because people ask these questions and like, like, oh, AP, you're the sports guy. What are your thoughts? I'm like, what's the record? And they're like, what are you talking about? Like, you don't know? And I'm like, well, I don't really look at that. Like, that's not like kind of an important criteria for me to know on a day-to-day basis. It was kind of like, I don't know if you're watching the show yesterday, like, or it was on Twitter. I think people were giving BigT shit for not knowing who Cruz was, the Pirates.
Who's in the farm?
Yeah, I didn't know that guy. I had no idea who he was. Like, I mean, so it's kind of like that. But as far as like what I can identify, with is pitching. Pitching's been pretty wild. It's and I kind of like that. I kind of like to embrace kind of that volatility that comes with baseball, because you have these pitchers who are studs, but they're not, I mean, man, any of them can get, rocked now, because you have these hitters that are just swinging for the fences. It seems like every at bat. And what that creates on the other side too, is look at Acuna Jr., you're a Braves guy. I mean, him and Trout both had, spans where they went 2 weeks without a hit, maybe more than that. And these are two of the best hitters in baseball. So that's one thing I love. I love embracing the volatility. So like yesterday, I was really kicking myself for this because we all talked about the slate. So this is the Tuesday slate. Dylan Cease, I think, had the best. I think he had the best outing against Toronto, where it was really hot. It was 97, 98. And the total in that game was like 9.5 runs. And so it spooked everyone off. Like, Cease was 9% owned. That was like a hindsight situation where it's like, gosh, we hated pitching on that slate. Why didn't we just lock in the guy that's striking out 34% of batters, And so that's the thing with pitching. I think it's you that often say when you're doing the shows, whoever the highest price or projected owned guy is, you're always looking to get leverage off of that person if you can. And I really like that. I think that's a good kind of sound initial principle or rule to have when looking at pitching, especially when it's been so volatile this season. So I don't know if that really answered your question. I mean, those teams, like, I'm not surprised they're up there. I mean, I'm a closet Royals fan and they suck. They're terrible. So it makes things easy for me though, because I don't really have any bias anywhere. And it makes stacking different teams really easy, which I think is important in MLB.
Yeah, it's more of this thing that, and we'll get to this point talking about the haves and the have-nots of baseball and why that is. But to your point about the pitching, it's, to me, I always look at this and try to break it down and think about, first of all, it's not just a projection to me. It's not just a game line. I try and look at what have they been doing, who have they been playing, and understand that they're human beings and not every day is going to be perfect. And so, last night's a good example. I was wrong. I played Cortez. I had a lot of Mania, but I full faded Spencer Strider because he had 2 great games against the Pirates at home and the Nationals on the road where Juan Soto was injured. And you had the Giants coming in, who've been really good once again this season, but they're a much better lineup than the Nationals. They're a much better lineup than the Pirates. And so I just said, man, his price went up. $1,000. Is he going to do this every day, what he's done the last 2 games? And that's what I ask of every pitcher. So I think looking at that is helpful. And then when you see guys that are going to be 50, 60% owned, the other question I try to ask, and I'll say this too on the shows, is this a pitcher that should be that highly owned, right? And if the answer is no, then that's a good spot to get off and try and move to somewhere else. And by the same topic, you mentioned you're a Royals fan. And with the Royals and the Angels started off very hot, and then all of a sudden just seemed like they forgot how to play baseball for about a month. And you mentioned that coincided with Mike Trout's really, really bad run, where I think it was 2 weeks, like you said, he didn't get a hit. But the Royals had to have hope in terms of an organization, in terms of the fan base, that this year was going to be the start of their better portion of their rebuild, right? They expected clearly to win more. I personally am not a huge fan of the way that Mike Matheny manages. I think that might have something to do. Certainly St. Louis believed it, which is why he's not there anymore. But in terms of the Royals and the Angels, from the perspective as a Royals fan, did you expect them to be winning more at this point? I mean, now the last week or so, they've started to actually look like they might have some life again here. But it seems to me that the pitching, the young pitching, they've drafted a lot of high school pitchers, just haven't really panned out. So where do you see the organization? Are you thinking that maybe the second half of the year is going to be the start of the better part of this rebuild?
Yeah, I mean, man, I like, there's going to be Royals, truthers out there that know way more than me on this topic. But I mean, one, as a baseball guy, it comes down to pitching. You need pitching. I don't care like how good your hitting is. You need pitching, and I forget their old manager name. I should know that at the top of my head, but his strategy and Matheny's strategy were completely different. And so they have this farm system going. They had all of these guys that they were working, building up or whatever. And Matheny comes in and changes everything up. And I don't know that, maybe he's looking further down in the future, getting some, really good hitting and stuff like that. But I agree with you in that I don't think he's done that good of a job, because if you look at their starting rotation, it's an absolute disaster right now. They have no one that they can really lean on. And some of these younger guys, I think they shipped off. The names are slipping my mind which ones, but if I saw them come across, the board that I'm looking at, I'm sure I'd recognize them. But so the Royals, I don't know. It kind of like they're not willing to they have such a loyal fan base, which is crazy. It reminds me of Nebraska sports. So if you don't know, I'm from Nebraska, born and raised. Anyone out there listening and, just thinking about Nebraska football, I'm telling you, on a Saturday here in Lincoln, I'm not the biggest Nebraska football fan. I make fun of a lot of people here just because it's like people would be crying in tears and stuff. I just think it's hilarious. But man, Saturdays, even with how bad Nebraska's been, it's crazy. 150,000, 200,000 people downtown Lincoln. The stadium sold out. I mean, the most passionate fan base. It's crazy with how bad they've been. But the Royals, I kind of see the same thing. They got their championship. They had that run with Alex Gordon and all those guys. They had good pitching then. They had a makeshift team where no one was like an all-star, but they're all on the same level playing really good baseball. And it was exciting as a fan at that time. I mean, even us up here in Nebraska, people were going nuts about it. So I think they're a long, long, long ways from being good. And I think it's just, if they can bring in some guys that will bring fans to the stands, that's kind of, where they're at as a team right now. But I see literally zero upside with this team right now until they can fix their pitching issues that they have.
Yeah, they're supposed to still have some good arms there. I think Ned Yost is the former manager that you were thinking about, who had a different philosophy there. And it's tough. It's tough to compete against these teams that have a ton of money. And I want to get into that. But first, the joke here is members never win. But if you're in our Discord on a nightly basis, you'll know that is about as far from the truth as anything is. A couple of guys recently, Scroggs 811 with a $5,000 hit in PGA, D Jones MB $20,000 in MLB, and this guy who is a mass multi-entry player, one of the better players, I think, over the last year in terms of guys that I've seen, and even taking a look at the way that he builds. DFS Hofbrau King, it's more than 100K. I think it was somewhere in the neighborhood of $250,000 the other night in Major League Baseball. Just amazing builds. And he does this a couple of times a week where he's hitting for six figures. And he's in our Discord. He's in our Discord watching the games at times. Doesn't really talk about plays all that much, but will come in and say a team that he likes from time to time. So these guys just continuing to win, continuing to really just smash these tournaments. And if you go into any single entry tournament out there, you're going to see all these Run Pure Sports members because they all play it and they all do fairly well in them. I think they're talking today that they're having a good day. They played the Blue Jays and the Astros, some of these guys. So should be an interesting afternoon here for us rooting those guys on. But in terms of the Royals, teams like not so much the Angels, although Artie Moreno, the owner, has been a little bit reluctant to really spend after getting burnt on some contracts. Albert Pujols, of course, and then Anthony Rendon's contract looks like it's going to at least be something that doesn't pay full dividends if it's not a complete bust in the same way that Pujols' later years were. But you have now the owner of the New York Mets, Steve Cohen, who comes from a finance background, hedge fund founder, runner, huge money there, and bought the Mets, as a hobby. Not a hobby that, oh, okay, I want to see a hobby because he's a lifelong Mets fan and he desperately wants to see the team win. They spend a ton of money over the offseason. Normally these things don't work out. I've been really impressed with Buck Showalter because no Jacob deGrom, almost for but a handful of starts, no Max Scherzer, Tyler McGill, who looked like this may be kind of a breakout season. He's been on the shelf, and yet, outside of a few bad series, they just keep winning. You have the Yankees, who spend probably not as much as they did, certainly in the heydays of George Steinbrenner, and not right now, not as much as the Mets, but you have the Dodgers, who are spending money. You have the Chicago White Sox, who've spent some money there. So, I mean, the Phillies spent a ton of money this offseason, bringing in Bryce Harper, Kyle Schwarber, Nick Castellanos. And then you have teams, Tampa Bay Rays, always going to be building in-house. And, joke is, if the Rays are wanting to trade you a player, you should immediately run the other direction because they are one of the best, along with the Dodgers, along with the San Francisco Giants, in understanding player development. And when it's time to cut ties with a player, traded Austin Meadows to the Tigers this season. I mean, I haven't heard from Austin Meadows all year. So there are those teams that do it well. And then you have teams that seem to be constantly rebuilding. The Oakland A's, who, they still have some talent, but man, it's got to be frustrating. I know it is for the fans. They're not going to the games. But when you think about this and you say, hey, baseball has a problem, despite the fact that they have this luxury tax, despite the fact that they have this revenue sharing, it's a significant problem in terms of where the money is and which teams are spending money. It doesn't create a competitive imbalance. I think there's no question it does. But in years past, we usually haven't seen this approach that the Mets have taken, that the Dodgers have taken by bringing in Freddie Freeman and all these other people. Usually doesn't work so well because you need a certain type of chemistry, a certain type of manager. In terms of businesses and business and management of finances, when you have 26 or 30, I guess, let's say 30 partners in a business, right? And that's what these teams are. They're partners in a business because without the Royals, without the Angels, without the Tampa Bay Rays, you don't have the Yankees, the Dodgers, the Phillies, all these other teams. Do you think there's a solution here? I know this is a big picture question, but do you think there's a solution at some point? I mean, the NFL seems to have pretty much resolved the issue outside of maybe the Jaguars and Cleveland, although Cleveland is spending money. Seems like the NBA has done a pretty good job where they were getting teams in Oklahoma City to be competitive in the finals a few years back. Is there a solution? Do you have to have a salary cap? Is there something else that baseball could be doing to be making teams more competitive or forcing some of these teams to spend at least a reasonable amount of money to try and be competitive?
That's such a good question and thing to think about because, so I think a lot of people out there would say yes. I'm going to say, I'm going to say no. I'm going to say I like how they're doing it right now, where it's almost like a capitalistic system where, you got the most money to spend. You can bring in the big boys, pay guys big money. That doesn't mean that those guys are going to perform. I mean, the Royals showed how you can do it on a small budget. I know there's been other teams as well that have done that same thing. Like the Royals right now, what they need to be doing, like look at a guy like Sal Perez. Now I don't like, he's probably wants to retire as a Royal, who knows, but like if I'm the Royals organization, I would have considered, moving him after last year, with the guy, MJ Melendez is a stud, Bobby Witt, these guys, you got to build around them. Like in the NBA, look at Oklahoma City. Like that's one thing that they're trying to do right now. Lock down on these guys that they can build around. Very difficult to do, but you have to have a long-term, kind of horizon to that process. But like with baseball, it's just, I'm really like not like an expert in understanding, like kind of like with NBA salary cap and going over, under, and all that different stuff. I probably know a little bit about it. Is it so, JT? Is it just is there any type of cap in baseball, or it's just like, man, you can bring in this amount of money and like could the Saudis with what they're doing with Live come? And I'm not saying them come over and do it, but if someone wanted to, some big hedge fund, multi-billionaire, maybe Elon Musk buy up a team like the Royals, put a couple $100 million in there and build a team like that up. Is it free to do with what you please, or like how does it work?
Well, I don't think you'll see the Saudis owning a baseball team, just because the Major League Baseball owners are pretty restrictive on who they let in. I was actually, there was some that said it was a little bit of a surprise that they let Steve Cohen buy that team, given some of his background and SEC investigations. But I think ultimately more of those owners thought that having the Mets be a competitive team in New York, where for years they were mismanaged, would be better for the game, knowing that, that no one's going to win every season. So I think the thought there won out. There are a couple of things here that, to answer your question, that don't so much restrict, certainly not a full restriction, but they do have a luxury tax. So if you spend above a certain dollar amount, I think it's somewhere in the low $300 million range. Might be a little bit less than that. It might be completely off. So I'll look it up after this. But if you spend more than that, then you pay a certain amount of tax that goes to the league. It may even go to the other teams. Then there's revenue sharing. So revenue sharing is for the teams that are grossing the most amount of money. So think the Yankees, the Mets, the Dodgers. On any given year, it could be different, right? Probably the teams in Chicago, Cubs, White Sox, they're going to pay a percentage of their proceeds into a pot that goes to the Tampa Bays, the Kansas Cities, the Oaklands of the league. And the biggest, I think one of the biggest complaint, and where I can see where, because there's so much that baseball owners don't agree on. I don't think you'll see a salary cap. I don't even think you'll see this luxury tax make more than small adjustments upward year to year, just because owners are concerned with that. But one of the things is maybe having a floor of what you must spend. So if you're the Oakland A's and you're the Rays or the Kansas City Royals, what have you, and you get, let's say, $25 million through revenue sharing, right? You can't just pocket that money. You can't just say, hey, we're going to take this as and put it towards our profit. Let's say you have to spend, and it could be, for some teams, it may even be more than that. But let's say you force them to spend 60% of that on player salaries, right? And say you must have a salary base. They're concerned about it, saying you must have a certain salary base. They say, well, some teams will go out of business because that's just, they're in small markets. Well, then you have a business problem. You have a real business problem, right? Tampa Bay, if you've got a stadium that nobody wants to go to, that's just disgusting. And number two, you're in a location where, baseball's just not that popular. There's a lot to do in Tampa, St. Pete, that people just, they'd rather, baseball is far down the list of going to watch the Rays. Even when they're good, it's far down the list. So finding those locations, and it's tough, that really will support a Major League Baseball team. So I think it's really hard to say that there's certainly no one answer that's going to solve everything. But I think when you see year after year, and the Oakland, look, let's be fair, the Oakland A's have done very well during certain periods of time, right? They've had, stretches where they've been very good. There were stretches where they made the playoff for 5-6 years in a row and were competitive recently with the way that they've been building their team. But I think what they're doing now, it's really what's going on now is a lot of city politics in Oakland. They want a new stadium. There's been a ton of lawsuits about whether or not they can move from what was Alameda County Stadium. I think they'd prefer to go to Vegas or really anywhere else. And the city of Oakland has some leverage on them. So I think that is what's unfortunate for if you're an Oakland A's fan. With Tampa Bay, I think they've long given up on the prospect that Tampa is going to support that team and that the city is going to support them through. I don't think a new stadium is the answer. It's hot as hell in Tampa during the summer. So people, I'm sure, would rather be swimming in their backyards than sitting in a hot stadium. So unfortunately, no easy answers there. But you mentioned that pitching and leverage and talking about looking at who the highest pitchers are, looking at ownership, looking at who the leverage points are. Give me a little bit about, and the people that are listening, a little bit into your process, not the full process, because that's obviously proprietary and it does you very well. And I don't want you to give away all the secrets, but just a couple of things that you do every day when you first look at a slate. Do you look in the morning at lines to see where they adjust? Because that's something that I've been doing the last couple of years, is getting up and seeing what Vegas or whoever sets the lines thinks about a certain game and seeing where it ends up, seeing where the money is going. What time do you start? What are a couple of things you look at? And what really gets you to hone down your pitcher pool in particular?
Yeah, good question. Starting with my process, usually what I'll do right in the morning, just because like all of us, it's always good to have a really good morning routine, just something that you can consistently do each and every day. And for me, it's not working out in the morning. When I used to try to do that, and I do these boot camps at 6 a.m, and the first 20 minutes, I was terrible at it. I wasn't awake. So I realized that's not my thing. Usually what I'll do, and this is true for NBA and MLB, any of the main sports out there, I build a basic note sheet where I just look at who's playing who. So just looking at today, Cubs against Pirates, and I write down Cubs. I write what their team total is there at the start of the day. At Pittsburgh, and I write down their team total. I write down the pit. So I write stuff down just because for me, that's kind of how I learned back in school, just reading it, but then also writing it down. And it helps me to get familiar with all of these players, so that as the season goes on, I'm like, oh, okay, I know this guy really well now, inside and out. And so it's just part of my process that I do each and every day. So I'll write down the pitchers, who's facing who. I like to look at a few basic stats for the year. I like to compare it to past years. I've added to that process and using FanGraphs, talking with people like you, Draft Cheat, looking at pitch types. You can look, there's so much data in baseball now, velocity over periods like games, and then over periods of times too, to see maybe an older pitcher, is velocity dropping. If it's a guy who's highly reliant on a fastball and, high velocity fastball, and that's dropping, that's going to be a bad thing. That's going to be a thing that these major league hitters can pick up on. So it's the little details in the process, picking up on them throughout the day, just to build a base. I think everyone so I do think projections, especially in NBA, we talk about this all the time. Projections are so much easier to kind of calculate and to be better in NBA, because you have 5 players starters, and more people can rotate in, but we have an idea of coaching tendencies, what player is going to get what type of minutes and what their projection is in a given range, throughout the season. That allows us to create a really solid projection. I think that's tougher to do with baseball. I think with hitting, it's almost impossible to do. Like I think Saber does it a good time with the simulations that they run. Anytime I'm MME multi-entering, I'm focused on stacks, and I don't really care about the projections that much. It's more so big picture view, focusing on the stacks. But as far as pitching goes, I do in good pitching matchups and those top pitchers, McClanahan, Cole, all the top guys, I rely a little bit more on the projections there. And I love locking those guys in. That's when I'll eat some chalk. On these people that are these young talents that are up and coming, I take more of a standpoint with you. And I really try to take a step back. So I understand as a rule, projections are going to dictate and kind of determine ownership. So one, you have to have a good idea of where the projections are at in the industry. That's going to give you a reasonable idea of where ownership is going to be. What's going to push that ownership up? A high strikeout thrower against a team that's not very good or strikes out a lot. That's going to be one of the fundamental things there that raises that projection up. So I think yesterday's example with the pitcher that you were talking about, Strider, was a really good one where for me, it was kind of hard to take a step back. And I wish I would have. We're on the show talking about it. And I kind of just, I fell into that routine where I didn't lock him in, but I had a good number of shares of him. But I actually liked Contreras a little bit more, who is cheaper. It's not like he broke the slate or anything like that. I think he put up like 15 DK points, but on a night where the two highest owned pitchers combined for like -1, we're going to take 14. We're going to take anything that's positive in the double digit numbers on a night like that. The other thing too that I failed to do was looking at and identifying who the actual best pitcher was on that slate, which was Dylan Cease, in a tough matchup against the Blue Jays. However, I'd watched two of the Blue Jays games the 2 days before. And this is where watching the games, I think, is really important. And I know not everyone has time to do that. I think a lot of us on our team do, though. And I was watching the Blue Jays hitters, and they just didn't seem like their normal self. They weren't, you'd see a Vladdy home run every now and then, but Springer kind of he seems like the guy that gets them going. When he's on, it seems like everyone else falls in line there. He was kind of off early on in that series. And man, I really overlooked Cease. I was overweight on him because he was 8% or 9%. I had him in two of my, I think I ran 8 or 10 builds. But still, it just seemed like a spot where, man, the highest strikeout guy on the slate, I think he's striking out hitters at a 33% rate on the season. No, the only other guy that was close was Strider, and it would have been just the ultimate pivot there. So I do think what you have to do is throughout your research process or whatever your process is, put in reminders. Hey, take a step back, look at everything, look at ownership. Don't like fall in love and then blindly remove everything else. Make sure you're constantly taking a step back and asking yourself, hey, do I really want to eat all of this chalk? And if so, then commit to it. But so yeah, I don't know if that kind of answers your question, but I do think with baseball pitching in general, with how volatile it's been and higher variance, you could call it, it's fine to move off a chalk pitching option. There's the other side to it too. I know Big T talks about this often, is eating chalk at pitching, because we can get different with hitting, because people are afraid to leave salary on the table. They're afraid posting a lineup without a Mike Trout in it, or a Devers, or one of these, Judge, one of these big hitters. And man, we see it all the time. Those guys can go 0 for 5, 0 for 4 in any given night in any matchup. So that's kind of how I see it. But my basic rule at pitching though is, for the good guys, Cole, McClanahan, I'm okay with locking them in, especially in a good matchup. Everyone else right now, I'm taking a deep dive in, and I'm just trying to find ways to get a little bit different on a slate-to-slate basis.
I think that's a great breakdown. And look, it doesn't always work out. I mean, Cookie Carrasco today is a good example, kind of definitely not as good a pitcher as Dylan Cease, but same situation where he was the second best pitcher on the slate by metrics, by statistics. Tough matchup, certainly, The numbers, K-prop, everything supported him. He didn't pitch well, pitched terribly. He's negative. But some days that is going to happen, especially with what we talked about with the volatility of pitching. But I think that's a great breakdown in terms of looking at what's important, what's most important for pitching, strikeouts and guys that have length, that have a long leash, right? A manager that's going to leave them in, and maybe they can get you. You want at least 6 at this point in the season, but I like those guys that, hey, I know if he's pitching well and running pure to coin a term, he can get into the 7th. He can get into the 8th inning. AP, where can the people find you? What other content are you doing here? I know you're doing the PGA this time of year. I think I botched your Twitter handle, but where can the people find you? What other content are you doing that people can check out? Because I do think that, like a lot of us, we have a very, very strong team here, but I think you're very, very strong in terms of how you analyze PGA, NBA, MLB, all these sports.
Yeah, it is AP8809 DFS, I believe. So, and what's funny, I think I've told the story before, but I think I signed up so long ago where I just thought your username was supposed to be like your email address. And so that's where Peterson8809 came from. Just my email address at Gmail. If you want to, email and spam that one, you can, but I'm not like, that's not like my main email address anymore. And I hate email. I'm not an email guy at all. I mean, it's brutal. I'm more of, I like Discord. I like these things that like Discord always have up on my computer. That type of technology, I think, is becoming really cool, as far as like communicating, because none of us, the company, we don't all live by each other. I know, Big Uncle T, obviously Rubio, they all live there where Big T lives, but outside of that, we're all in our different places. So Discord makes it really easy for us all to communicate. But yeah, as far as content goes, I mean, trying to spend more time kind of on the business development side in the background. There's a lot of things that we need to work on, improve on. And so I do spend a lot of time with that. But outside of that, PGA, MLB, I like to do a playbook every now and then. It keeps me, engaged and just like, if something happened to where we didn't have anyone to do it, someone has to do it. And so it's good for, me or anyone else to know how to do that. So PGA, MLB, that's kind of where it's at for me right now.
Back to your roots on the playbook. I love it. And I think you're going to be on it this Sunday for Uncle T, who's on a trip.
Yeah.
AP, thanks for joining me on the Sweet Spot Pod. Thank you for listening. We will catch you all next week. Simon, let us get going.